Good evening, good morning, good night, good late afternoon, wherever you are on this beautiful planet. I'm here in Amsterdam. It's 21 in the evening, and I'm going to tell you about extreme single sourcing. In fact, this is something that I have been presenting about 5 years ago, but since then nothing has happened to it. So I decided to redo this talk, but then redo the demo to show you how this really works. So extreme single sourcing, DCQL, and the smart data browser. Very briefly about myself. This is me. 62 years ago, I studied physics, psychology, philosophy since then, and I've been using DITA since 2005. And I've been doing all kinds of crazy stuff with DITA documents, as Stefan can acknowledge. He's seen most of my presentations. But I'm not going to talk much about me. I'm going to talk about data in documents. So we're all using DITA because of reuse of content. But there's one thing that is very often forgotten, or it's neglected, or maybe people lack the imagination that you could do it, which is product data in documents. So very, very often in the industry, I have seen data sheets that have lots of sections which contain just product data. And this really comes from a product database. You have this document, this document, this document, they all very much look alike. They might not be completely the same. They're not pulled out of a database straight, which is one other strategy that you could have. But a lot of those sections are really, they contain data that is inside of a product database. And what we do if we try to maximize our reuse of the actual documents of those standard sections is that we push all the data into an appendix. And that's not really very user-friendly. You get this product description that is very generic, and it points to the appendix to see all the specific data for your particular product. Very often, people try to find the data. They miss the right column, and they do the wrong thing because they picked the wrong data. You put the burden to find the right data on the user, which is not a very user-friendly way to do things. So instead of that, you could use a con-key-ref, as we have seen in DITA, but then this just moves the issue elsewhere because you still have to put the data into a DITA document before you can con-key-ref it into your data sheet. So now, okay, this is better for the user who sees all the data in the right place, but you still have to copy-paste the data from your product database into some kind of DITA document before you can con-key-ref it. And that, in my mind, that is copy-paste. And in my mind, being a true reuse specialist, copy-paste should be illegal. I've even created a song about that, the DITA song, which goes like, no copy, no paste. Think about Bob Marley, tune, etc., and then you have it. So what we really need is we need to pull product data from the source straight into the DITA document. That was my imagination like 5 or 6 years ago, and I thought this must be possible. So then after trying out all kinds of stuff with this, I decided to show this to the world, and I gave a presentation, and the slides that I used back then 5 years ago are so good that I'm going to do a very, very quick flash repeat of those slides. This was the title of that talk in November 2016, DITA Married Data. So DITA, happy single, fully self-supporting, quite special, but not attached to anything or anyone. She lived in her own space, but something was missing, as if she was always one step behind. She felt she needed more life. So she hired a matchmaker, 3 guesses who that is, and he found this is obviously somebody who's always up to date with a name like that. So there was some experimenting, etc., and then finally they got married. So at that moment, when I gave this presentation in 2016, it remained to be seen whether that marriage would be happy at all, whether there would be any kinds of, useful new beings that came out of that. And basically nothing, not much has happened apart from, the couple of experiments that I've done on my computer. Not much has happened. So let me go back to this idea and explain it to the audience today one more time, and then I'll show you how that actually works in a real demo. So the basic idea is that database queries are put into the DITA content, and this is done with an abstracted, simplified query syntax because nobody really needs full SQL. Technical authors, if they're writing data sheets, they don't need the full power of SQL. They just need a simple matter of, okay, you point to a database, you point to a table in the database, you point to a field, you point to an item, there you have your product data. That's what you want to pull into your document. So I'm going to go into a couple of more details when I show you the demo, so I'm going to quickly pass over to the next slide. What I designed 5 years ago is DCQL. So that's my acronym for it. I couldn't use CQL because that's already taken by the Apache database product, so I decided to choose DCQL, which is DITA Cascading Query Language. Now, this slide is not so very important. I'm just going to show you what that looks like. You define a data source in the DITA map, and in that DITA map you have data def, which is a specialization of key def, and the data def specifies where is your source. Like here in this case, this is my data server, and there's a process there, a PHP process that serves up the data so that I can talk to with my simplified query language. And that will resolve the language into whatever database you have back there and send me back the data in the format that I need. So you have your user credentials, and then you have a couple of data points that indicate what should I do with PDF targets. Okay, well then you resolve the data queries when you publish. So that's all detail that we can skip over at the moment. So let's look at how you actually put data into your DITA document. So this was the original idea with a table that has a data ref attribute, which might be a specialization of the base attribute. And it indicates, okay, the source is data01, which is specified in the map. How to get there, that's in the map. This is just in the document. In your topic, you just specify, okay, I need source data01. I need table product data. I need fields item, name, price, and stock. And I want to order my items according to name and then to stock. Okay, so together, all of those, so those 4 items that you have here, the source, the table, the fields, and the order, they form a full SQL query. So you send it to the server and it sends back a full table. That's as simple as I can explain it. And I will show you that in the demo that's coming up right in a couple of minutes. Now, apart from being able to pull a full table out of a database into a document, that might look special, but it's, a lot of people are doing that with special XSLT and all kinds of JavaScript or whatever that you have. But it becomes really interesting when you look at the cascading rules that I have put into this DCQL method. And actually, the next slide is going to show you that much better. This is setting the data context to, okay, my data source is data01, and then right at the top level of this topic, I put a filter. I say, okay, I only want to see data that has an ID 1001. Okay, so that's filtering out the data that comes from the data source. Whatever table I'm going to be in, I'm always going to look for a field with the name ID and with the value 1001. So then in my topic, I have a section where I'm going to talk about product data. And that's a table, because that's where the name and the all kinds of attributes of the product are. The name, the price, the size, the brand, whatever I have there in that database. So on the section, I put the data context table product data, which means that everything below that level inside of that section will inherit the table product data, and it will inherit the source data 01 and the filter ID 1001. So the only thing that is still missing to get a full pointer to one specific product data item in the database is the field. So I can write the and then XY 1001. That will be the field name of whatever product I'm talking about. Is the 4-cylinder version of. I can also, because it's cascading rules, I can overrule the item by indicating another item, which overrules the filter ID 1001. Actually, there's a typo there because it says item 42. It should have been filter : ID 42. Obviously, for those who have understood the cascading rules and this simplified query language, they had already seen that immediately, of course. Now, I can talk about this for forever, but that's not going to bring us much closer to what it really looks like. So what I've decided is to cut my time of presenting the slides real short. With the delay that I started with, it's only been like 15 minutes. So I'm going to jump straight into the demo. And this is something that I've created over the past couple of weeks. A lot of hard work in this, and I know that if you want to use this kind of technology, you're not going to go here into this topic and then go to the base attribute and then manually type in what you need to type in. That would really be I don't know, that would be torture for the technical author. So what you really need is a way to set all kinds of scopes and all kinds of attribute values through some kind of useful user interface. So that's what I've done. I've created a smart data browser. So that's coming up right here. That's this one. Now, the way that I set up my workspace is usually I want to see my structure view because I want to see where I am. I want to see my elements so that I know what I can insert at every point in the document. I want to see, obviously, I want to see my document here, and I have my smart data browser right here. Okay, so how do we pull a table out of a database? Well, let's see. We choose a database, and at this moment, for this demo, I only have one database available. This is a database that lives on the internet. So, and I can show you that. This is where my database is. I have a domain yang.nl, and there's a SQL database there, and it has 3 tables: application, physical, and product info. Okay, so I'm looking at the application table right now. This is an actual data source on the internet. Of course, in companies that would be in the intranet. You don't want to expose all of your product data on the internet without all kinds of security layers, etc. So normally the tech writer will be in an organization where they have the a web interface to their database on the intranet. Okay, so that's a one-time setup where the smart data browser finds that information. That's been set up here already. So I have my DCQL database. And as soon as I select this one, it goes and finds all the tables that are available in my web-based database engine. And there's 3 tables there. So if I click on application, it actually goes into, this was very quick, but it actually goes into the internet, goes to the database, retrieves the data from that table. And you can see here that it's nicely displayed in with pages, etc. It's at this point I have 3 pages. This is the last page. I can go back and forth and look at the data, and I could basically inject this data into my document if that is valid. So this is a table, right? So if I go to get and I click on table, it says, you cannot put a table in this location because I'm here right at the top of my topic. If I go here and I do the same, click table, there you go, I got my table, right? Now, this is very nice, but then normally I don't want to have all of those fields in my document. I only want to have a number of those fields. So I go back in here. This is still the same table. And I'm going to, well, ID looks like it's useful, so I'm going to deselect some of those columns that I'm at this moment, for this particular data sheet, I'm not interested in all of those. So I'm going to remove these and then do it like this. And I click on get and I click on table, and it replaces the whole table with this. Okay, so now I have my table here in my document. And the interesting thing now becomes that if you look at this, this 02220 method is brush. Let's say something changes in the product database, because this inserting data into a document, that's it might be cool, but it's not that special. It becomes really cool when you see that there's some changes here. If I change this into airspray, like so. Oh, this is changed on the internet. You can see here, this is on the internet, right? I'm going to go back to my FrameMaker, and I'm going to tell my FrameMaker to refresh the data in the document. And there you go. This is now airspray. So it actually refreshed the data. And I don't need to have the data browser open. I don't even have to have the document open to refresh it. The refresh is a 100% XSL transform, which has no need for FrameMaker to open that document to refresh it. There's no code in FrameMaker that does this. Here, I have the code that injects the data and gives me a preview. But the actual query is in the document. You can see it here. If I open this, you can see here that I have get source DCQL table application fields ID method nozzle pressure recode. That describes a full query for this entire table here. So when the data has changed, or the data might have changed, before I publish this document, I will simply rerun the XSLT and it will update the data with the newest data in the database right now, which means that it's not just an optimization of the work of the author. It's going to be easier to inject table data and product data, etc. But it's also increasing the reliability, because it's no longer a copy-paste, copy into your head, paste it out of your fingers into your DITA document, and you might make a change. And which you, in a large table like this, you will never even notice that you have made a change. In some products, in some product data, that might actually cause accidents. It might actually cause people to die. If you're in the medical arena and you do a typo, the comma is one level up. So somebody gets a way higher dose than they should ever get, and they die, right? So it's going to happen. How is that going to affect your job and your company? So reliability and traceability is increased, and that was That was my main goal. It's not to make life easier for the author, but to make it more reliable, because you're tapping right into the product database. And then, of course, you could say there might be mistakes in the product database. Yeah, but that's a different problem to solve, right? Okay, so let's look at something a little bit more exciting, which is I have a product data here. Oh, that's this. No, sorry, that's this one. I have a product data sheet. Let's build a data sheet, because it's not just a full table that I can pull in. I can actually pull in individual items out of the database into my data topic. So here I'm in this data sheet, and I'm going to set the scope for this entire data sheet. This is going to be a data sheet about one particular item. Let's go to the source, and I'm going to go to product info, and I'm going to select this item 02220. And here in the set tab, I have a number of things that I can do. I can set the scope at any element in my data document. I can set the scope. So here I'm going to set the item. What happens is that here I will have set source DCQL, which is already put in there because that's for all the documents at the moment in this demo. And I put filter ID 02220. Okay? So this means that everything in this document, unless it is overruled, will be referring to ID 02220. So now if I go into a title, like here, I can select the name of this, so the name field out of this table, and I'm going to put get item, and then it puts in this item. So the only thing that is put in here is table product info fields name, right? So let's put a section here and say, okay, there's a title. In this section, I have a, where is it? It's title. And this is product information. Now, in this type of section, you might want to have a table that indicates a number of, a number of fields out of this, well, basically all the fields, except for the ID, because you already now have the ID. So, okay, how can we do that? I select this table, and I can basically inject a record. There you go. You got all the data there. But now you don't want to have the ID in there, so you can unselect one of those fields and then go back to get and click on the record, and there you go. You have the name, the type, the size, the price. Oh, now it has price double. That's not good. Okay, that's a little glitch in the code. There's always some things that remain to be done. So, okay, next section. I'm going to put in a section here. This is application data. And here I'm going to go to the application data table. Again, I'm going to select fields. So I'm going to cut this one, and I maybe do all of the rest. Okay, there we go. Bang, you got it, right? So I save this document. Now this becomes a data sheet that is reusable across all of those products, because it just contains a record, an easily human readable record of all the data in the product database, in the product table, and the application data. You could actually have multiple databases that you drag information into the same data sheet out of multiple databases. But for the sake of this demo, I kept it easy with just one data source. Okay, so what happens if I now change the scope? So the filter ID, I can go to my, let's go back to my physical data thing, and I go to maybe 15300. And on this highest level here, I can set the item right here. And I see here that it's 15300 now. This is not changed yet. But if I save this document and I refresh the data and document, oh yeah, okay, this typically happens during a presentation, right? Okay. So that didn't go very well.
The live demo.
Oh yeah, that's always, yeah, I like you know, living on the edge, huh? Okay, so there's a different, this was another topic that I created. Maybe I've done something wrong in my going back and forth and everywhere, etc. So let's do this again with the set item and see if this works on this particular topic. So click on that one and then do refresh data and document. And there we go. Everything, so not just the name of the product, but all of the data here and here and here, everything has been changed to the new data because everything inherits that that ID here. I can overrule the filter ID at any point. I can say, okay, I want to contrast this to something else. Then I can set the ID, the item on any element, on any section of data, any which way that I want to. So that is the core of this this type of product, and it is the user okay. One more thing that I wanted to show you is that there's synchronization, so that if you're already working on some of this, then you click somewhere and this is synchronized with what you are actually looking at in your document. So if you click here, it jumps to that table. It shows the record that you're looking at. If you click on one single item, it shows you that this item, this name field out of this table with that number, etc., is currently the one that is in scope. I couldn't really make it easier than this for this limited scope. I'm still working on extension of this to be able to filter the data, so like filtered table, where you say, okay, I only want to see everything that has a type varnish, for example. And I've come a long way to make that work, but it was not in time for the demo for tonight. But that's on the roadmap for the next couple of weeks. And then there's one thing that I actually just started right this afternoon, which is to allow you to define an iterator in the map. So you would create one data sheet, and in a data map, you would then put a base attribute iterate field type, and then whatever is, so that topic ref that you're pointing to would then be replicated automatically over all the distinct values of type in this table, and automatically create 4 or 5 different topics, subtopics in your map, without you having to create DITAVAL files, branch filtering, all kinds of hassle to make that happen. You know, in my approach, that should be really, you know, one line. You say, I want to iterate over these data, just do it. That's the basic idea. I think that's all I wanted to show you. We have plenty of time for any queries that you might have. Am I still online? You still there?
Yep, you're still there.
Because I cannot see any. I cannot see anything but my my slideshow interface. So.
Right. Okay, so let me.
Let me do it this way.
Again, the question when the recordings will be available. But as I said, probably next week. Rajan. Get that. Okay, that is unrelated. Assuming the way to get this tag is to get Smart Data Browser and integrate with our system, would it work with or other editors besides just FrameMaker? Does it work with CCMSs other than AM, or is it for AM only? It's not for AM at all, right?
It's at the moment, so this implementation is, so this Smart Data Browser, I've created this for FrameMaker. Next step is obviously making this kind of Smart Data Browser for other editors, but that's a little bit further in the future. I must say that without this Smart Data Browser, you could actually use that technology by typing in those attributes manually yourself, but that's not easy, right?
Right.
Labor intensive.
And then of course there's the second component that's also in progress. It's not finished yet. Is a DITA Open Toolkit plugin that actually does the work of pulling the data from a database. And that's
While
also
publishing them.
Yeah, for publishing. And then, well, actually, I have even created a version, a transform to HTML5 where the queries were kept intact inside of the HTML, which means that if you refresh a web page and the data has changed on the database, that you would actually get the new data.
Mm-hmm.
But most companies find that way too scary.
I mean, what would be interesting is to embed it, implement it also with AM, and then use it as a connector
Yes.
for between AM and some PIM system or so.
Yes.
That could. I can imagine a lot of use cases for that.
Yeah, and also important to note maybe is that I've used a simplified SQL method of querying databases. Right? You point to a database, to a table, to a field, to an item. You might have not SQL, but something else. And it is not like I'm not sending an actual SQL query to a database. I'm sending this simplified search, for this type of item in that type of table to the database engine. That database engine is part of the code. And that engine might translate it to a MongoDB or to whatever you have. It might also translate it to an XML database that you might have in the background. So there's no limit to what kind of database you actually have. What only needs to be done is that you teach your database engine, your DCQL engine, that opens up the database and gets the data. You teach it, this type of database, you approach it this way, and what it serves back is actually DITA. Okay, so it's either a single element or a table that it serves back.
Yeah. Okay. We have a few comments also in the chat, by the way, from Janu Kapu. Impressive stuff, and also impressive as always, Yang. And Sue Thompson, she wrote, stunning. I can see how useful this could be. And Belinda says, dankjewel, Yang. And we have more questions. Unanswered. So quite a lot.
So Mark was asking about incorporating existing queries, stored procedures into the DITA generation or into web data services. Is that with what you're doing right now? How easy is that to automate some of that production?
I'm not sure exactly what kind of technology is meant there.
Yeah. Well, I know that Mark is he's a Cold Fusion developer, so that may inform the position that he's coming from as well.
Yeah, I've tried to stay away from all kinds of existing frameworks as much as possible. I've written everything from scratch because you start using existing frameworks and you get into a whole tangle of ridiculous code complexion, etc. And basically, I had to do this because when you work inside a FrameMaker with the scripting, and the Smart Data Browser actually runs an embedded WebKit browser, but that browser cannot at all reach out to the internet. So everything goes through my JavaScript code, ExtendScript code, which is in FrameMaker, and that really, really limits your option to use all kinds of libraries because you simply cannot pull them in.
Right. So
this is as basic as you can get. So the core ingredient in all of this coding is a socket. Can you believe that? That's something that I learned when I first started using Unix 30 years ago, and it still works, right? So I'm actually manually coding the HTTP 1.1 protocol because there is nothing there. So all kinds of packages, very nice, everybody can be happy with those packages, but I'm not using them. It limits me too much.
Yeah, one question on your intent, because I believe I saw this presentation when you delivered it the first time a few years ago. And what was your intent in developing this product or this project? Was this as something that you wanted to be able to take as a standalone product, something you're hoping gets incorporated into FrameMaker? Where what was your driver other than sheer curiosity, which often is the driver for you?
On my first slide, on my slide about myself, it says addicted to challenge, right? So so I have always, since I started presenting stuff in the DITA world, etc., I have always tried to do stuff that nobody else is doing. I'm always the crazy guy who comes up with crazy ideas. So this was one of my crazy ideas, right? And I was actually expecting that after doing this with DCQL and after presenting this on a bunch of conferences, a lot of people were very enthusiastic. And now 5 years have passed and nothing's happened. Nobody's picking it up. So finally now I decided, you know what? If nobody's going to do it, then I'm going to do it. So yes, it's a full intention of mine to create this into a product.
Excellent.
It will be a licensed product, and it will have all the ingredients so both the processing in the DITA Open Toolkit. It will have the Smart Data Browser for FrameMaker, but also for other editors. And people will be totally happy to start using it, I hope.
Yeah.
It's finally time to go and start making some money on my crazy ideas, right?
Well, and of course, there's more than one product that's been developed in that way that has somehow managed to weave its way into the FrameMaker framework and be part of the release product. So
but it's too much of a niche product for me to see it becoming part of FrameMaker. Because the team who builds FrameMaker and creates new product versions, etc., they have to take a different kind of market into account, and only a very, very small portion of their users will possibly start using this. I'm looking at companies that I cooperate with as a consultant in large projects with large customer bases, and making this part of their solution. And when nobody really knows that they're actually using my stuff, as long as it pays the bills, I'm totally happy. I want this to be used.
Which brings another question: is this are you supplying this to anybody right now? Does anybody have this in place in their workflow right now?
This is brand new.
Okay.
This was literally finished, the status of today with the highlighting of this table record, etc., and the refreshing and everything was literally finished last night. And today I create during the day because I was finished last night. That's early, right? So today I decided, let's build this iterator, and I've finished it, but I cannot show it to you right now.
Stefan just had
a
a
world
heart
premiere. The world premiere, so to say,
Hey,
what you guys see here at DITAWORLD, Jang Graat launching a world new product that finished just last night.
There you go.
Okay, guys, I don't want to interrupt you in your conversation flow, but we have a lot of questions left, and only 8 minutes. So let's quickly go through a couple of them. First question from Gwen: when will it be available? Difficult to say.
night.
When it's done.
Last night.
Good question. The hard part is still creating the integration with Data Open Toolkit, because as everybody knows, Data Open Toolkit, if you want to do something to the output format, that's easy, but this is going right into the pre-processing stage of Data Open Toolkit. Not easy. So that will take me at least a couple of months to get that fixed, because without that, it's not nearly as useful, right? So it has to be part of the product. So it's going to be at least a couple of months. I would count on somewhere during at the end of the summer. That's probably a reasonable time frame to look for this product. You can keep track of what is happening by checking out my smartframemaker.com website, which has the information about the product right here. So there's also a smartdita.com, but that's not live yet.
Excellent.
Maybe you can put that URL in the chat then, Jang. Another user posted this question in the chat. Can this translate to RoboHelp? I'm not sure what translate to RoboHelp means in that context.
I believe she's asking if it's available for use in RoboHelp, and I think Jan, you said that it's specifically for FrameMaker right now. Yes.
Well, it's not so much specifically for FrameMaker, but it's DITA.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I don't know if you can actually use DITA straight in RoboHelp. If you can, then this would be usable, but then there's no user interface.
Well, that's what I was saying. Your UI is based in FrameMaker, so.
Yeah, but the technology in the DITA Open Toolkit plugin, that will be just based. So the user interface is just to put those queries in there, right? But the technology, the DITA Open Toolkit plugin, that will just work with whatever is in the DITA. Because that's the whole idea, is that you are not tied to the user changing the data, not even updating the document.
Mm-hmm. So someone would have to look at using extend script to put together a UI within RoboHelp. Am I reading you correctly there?
A lot of the UI is in the HTML part of FrameMaker, right?
Oh, this is I am probably the only person who's actually using HTML dialog in FrameMaker, right? Or have you seen other plugins? This is HTML, jQuery, JavaScript, all kinds of stuff. This is heavy-duty HTML dialog.
So from that perspective, it could be implementable in RoboHelp as well. At least,
but I don't know
not from the output perspective with the Open Toolkit, but you can use data attributes in HTML, and maybe that could be an approach. But let's not go into these details now. We can talk about that, Jang. I got some ideas about that.
Sure.
So, Ruben Roycer says this is great. Have you tried something like tried something like that against REST endpoints instead of a database? REST APIs?
What database?
REST API?
REST API. No. And that might be useful in the future, but at the moment, what I simply do is I call a PHP script that's on the server. That's it. There's no magic there. From the from the HTML dialog, I call an extend script in FrameMaker, and that uses a socket, really low level, a socket to connect to a PHP process on a web server, and that PHP gets the data. So for future developments, there will be some kind of encryption layer, because obviously you don't want to have your data travel across the internet without any encryption. So if you start using it on the internet instead of intranet, you will have to have some kind of security. But the point is that inside of FrameMaker, I have to create all of that encryption layer and all of the, you want to use REST API, I have to create all of that layer in JavaScript in FrameMaker because it's not there. That means that it's nice to have for somewhere in the future, but not anytime soon.
Okay. By the way, I've pasted the correct URL into the chat because the one you pasted is had some typo in it.
Okay. Thanks.
And I think that's it from the.
So Yang, do you have a couple of minutes to pop over into the chat and the QA after this and make sure that we got all your questions answered?
Sure, no problem.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.